What's going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we're going to be taking a look at the Gold Planar GL2000 double-sided version. Now, before we hop on into today's review, just a little disclaimer that this GL2000 was provided for review by Linsoul. Linsoul is an online audio retailer that is an exclusive dealer of quite a few different brands, and they have sent me quite a few things before in the past to take a look at. So once again, big thanks to them for loaning me this for review. However, do note that I am not paid or influenced in any way to say anything in particular about this product. I was just loaned it in exchange for my honest review and feedback. So without further ado, let's get into the review. So the GL2000 is a planar magnetic offering that had a bit of a hype train going for a while. I'm definitely a little bit late to the hype, but I thought I would throw my hat into the ring and we will see what I think about it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get specs out of the way. So the GL2000 here is coming in at $340. It is using a 60 ohm planar magnetic driver with a sensitivity of 99 dB a milliwatt on the double-sided version and a frequency response of 4 to 50,000 hertz. Now, moving into the build of the GL2000, it's a little bit mixed. The headband is nice, feels like a leather headband with pretty good padding all in all. No suspension strap here, but decently padded headband. The little arms here on the headband are metal, so is this little block. This yoke is also metal, but it is a very thin metal, but it doesn't really flex too much. I don't think that's really going to be much of a weak point. The cups themselves are a plastic material. And then the grill feels actually kind of cheap. It has like a metal grate, which is fine, but these little gold like bars are a cheap plastic that bend a lot if you kind of flex on them. Not that you would really ever be doing that, but just something to note. 3.5 millimeter connectors on the bottom, and then the pads themselves are really nice, soft leather pads. There also is the alternate ones with kind of like a micro suede on the fascia and some perforations. And yep, that's about it for the build on the GL2000. And then as for comfort, I personally find the GL2000 pretty comfortable. It has pretty good headband padding up top. It has pretty nice big ear pads that are very soft and quite deep. And I really have no issues wearing these for several hours at a time. I don't think many people will, but if you are particularly sensitive to weight, the lack of a head strap might get to you, but I think that most people will not have much of an issue with the GL2000. And then as for included accessories, you do get a big, heavy, hard shell Pelican style case. It looks actually more similar like the old Seahorse cases that ZMF either used to use or still uses. You get an alternate set of pads that again have a micro suede and a little bit different shaped hole and some perforation on the exterior. And then you get this cable by default. You can pay extra for other cables, but this is the cable you get by default. Do note that it is a 4.4 millimeter cable, so you will need either something that has 4.4 or you will have to adapt this 4.4 into whatever connector that you need. There is no single-ended cable included by default as far as I can tell. So that is just something to note with the GL2000. All right, so now into the sounds part here of the GL2000. So starting off with frequency response, as we typically do, the GL2000 has got a decent bass extension. I'd say maybe a dB and a half to 2 dB of roll off by the time you get down to 20 hertz, but more or less flat bass extension as you would want out of a planar magnetic headphone. There's a little bit of shout at 1 kilohertz, about maybe 2 dB or so it has a little bit of shout there. But then after that, the rest of your upper mid-range is actually quite recessed. It's somewhat reminiscent of an Odyssey headphone, not quite as bad, but not far off from that. So you have quite the recession at the 2 kilohertz, 3 kilohertz region. And then on top of that, your upper treble with the leather pads, at least, is very recessed. I would say probably 4 or 5 dB up in that 9 to 10K region. And they tend to have a bit of a weird air above 10K. It gets a little bit spicy depending on the track. The hybrid pads, to my ear, have even less upper mid-range, but they do bring up the treble a little bit. So those are arguably the better pads, depending on what you value. But that is pretty much the overview of the frequency response on the GL2000. And then as for intangibles, in terms of detail, the GL2000 for $630 is pretty much going right against the HiFiMan Ananda and the Focal Elex. I don't think it really competes with either of those in terms of overall resolution. It's not like super low res, but the amount of resolution this produces seems much more reminiscent of the Sundara. I would say it's at best on par with the Sundara, if not slightly worse than that in terms of overall resolution. In terms of dynamics, has overall the typical kind of planar compression, but it's not nearly as dead as like the super low-end HiFiMan planars like the old 400i or whatnot. It actually has decent bass presence and decent punch for a somewhat lower-end planar, but again, sounds about on the level of the Sundara. In terms of timbre, plasticky, that's the pretty typical planar plasticky timbre. Again, not the worst by any means, but about average for a planar magnetic headphone. In terms of dynamics, somewhat, like I said, somewhat compressed overall. Transients are tiny bit blunted on the attack, but it's about what I would expect for something in this price point. In terms of soundstage, I would say it is about average, maybe slightly above average, but again, nothing special overall. And imaging is also about average, really nothing noteworthy there. And I believe that is about it for the sound segment here on the GL2000 double-sided. So as for what I think about this headphone, for its price point, I don't really think it is particularly competitive. It sounds technically about on the level of a Sundara, with tuning that is vaguely similar to an Odyssey headphone. So it almost seems like a alternate tuning Sundara in a way that is arguably, I guess you could make the argument that it's better built in some areas. It actually has swivel, which is nice, and I like the pads more than the Sundara, and you have the big case. But I really don't think that it's worth $640. It really falls behind the Ananda and the Elex and a few other things in that price category. If it was like $350, I guess I could see it if you just want something as an alternate Sundara tuning. But I would still probably take the Sundara over this just because of its tuning performance, despite it, I guess, being a little bit worse built and having worse accessories. But that is my take on the GL2000 double-sided. Not a completely terrible headphone by any means, but not worth its price and doesn't really do anything particularly special to me. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed my review of the GL2000 double-sided. Once again, big thanks to Linsoul for providing this for review. I will link their store in the description below, as well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.